Hey there, this is Ray with ArmchairGeneral.com. For the last few years, we've been bringing you game and book reviews in a text-based format on the website. And with this endeavor, we're going to experiment with a video format. Mostly it's to see that we can, and then also to see how well it's received. It is our first attempt doing this. Bear with us. We are definitely learning as we go. So if it seems a little rough, that's to be expected right now. We're in the iterative development process. Alrighty, so let's dive in here. Today we're going to talk about a game from White Dog Games, and it is Into the Lion's Mouth, the Second Anglo-Sikh War, 1848-1849. It's a nice cardboard box, beautiful artwork on the cover. If you're unfamiliar with the Sikh Wars, first and second, that's understandable. It's a relatively obscure topic in mainstream tabletop board gaming, or conflict games, war games, whatever you want to call them. It's something I've had an interest in for some time, definitely more than a decade, even longer. So I was excited to see this game come to the table. I'm not familiar with any other dedicated tabletop board games on the Anglo-Sikh Wars. So to me, this was like a rare opportunity to see the topic explored in the context of a two-player hex encounter war game. Now, if you want to learn more about the Anglo-Sikh Wars, I'm going to recommend you read The Second Anglo-Sikh War. And this is by Amarpal Singh. It's a relatively recent book. I don't have the exact copyright. Here we go, 2016. So it is pretty new, a good modern history. Amarpal Singh's also written a text on the first Anglo-Sikh War. So he's sort of the current modern go-to for a definitive social, cultural, and military overview of the two wars. If you're scrounging for older books, Cook is another good source. They're definitely much older and very much from an Anglo point of view. Alrighty, so Into the Lion's Mouth is, as I say, a hex encounter game, and the map is a lovely 17 by 22 inch map sheet, color, nicely done. We'll talk about that in detail in a bit and get into that. Also in there, rule book. It's a paperback booklet, 16 pages. It is printed in color, and you can see that there. Nicely done. It's cleanly laid out. It's clearly laid out. So I found this easy to follow and walks you through how to play the game very nicely. I did not have a lot of questions about the rules using that. And if you did, there's this lovely 4-page extended example of play that's included with the game. It just kind of walks you through the turn. You can see units, how they move, how they'll fight. That was a big thing. How you check supply, I guess, is the other big thing in there. Alrighty. There's a single counter sheet, and unfortunately, I've already punched all the counters out. So, I could show you these, which I know is not real meaningful. We'll cover those in a little bit. We'll get you a closer view of what they look like. Beyond the map sheet and the rules, we've got a couple of organization tables, one for each player. These are for the field armies. This is where field armies are kind of the core maneuver element in the game. Everything that moves on the map will move within a field army. You'll see that there's 2 columns and rows. Each row represents a field army, and each column, or the columns represent, I should say, full strength points and weakened strength points. And that's how you track the strength of your army, is through the strength points. And that's a good point. I think if you're looking for an order of battle that's detailed down to like battalions and regiments, you're not going to find that here. As I say, the field army is the maneuver element. Everything else is aggregated under that field army. So you're not going to see Her Majesty's 10th Foot or the 11th Light Cavalry Regiment. You're just going to see that you have strength points of infantry and strength points of cavalry, and if you're really lucky, strength points of artillery with you as well. Okay, here we've got a quick look at the map. I've zoomed in a little bit on sort of the center section of the map because I think this gives you a great sampling of all the various terrain types you're going to see in the game. So, the region of the battlefield, the Punjab, is also known as the land of the five rivers, and you certainly see that represented here with the various rivers that are moved around. You've got, I don't even think you've got the Indus. Oh, yeah, you got the Indus up here, and then the Jhelum, the Chenab, and what we're not really seeing is the Sutlej off to the bottom. Oh, you kind of are seeing the very tail end of the Sutlej over here, which becomes the Bees River, actually. So the Sutlej is actually just off the bottom of the map image here. You've got musket is listed as a terrain type, so it's like the wooded, broken ground. I think the Sikh army gets an advantage when fighting in musket terrain. You've got rough terrain over here, scattered along the edge over this side as well, some musket. And then up in this area, you've got some mountainous terrain, and that's just a kind of the foothills of the Himalayas, or the Himalayas. You can also see how forts and cities are represented on the map. Prominently down there at the bottom, you're going to see Lahore, the capital of the Sikh state, which is also a fortress. It's also a victory point city. That's what the star is representing. And then there are fords across the river and another neighboring city right there. So nicely done. It's a very clean rendering of the terrain, and given the scale and the time frame, I understand what they're going for. I think I personally would have liked to have seen a little more of the built environment, specifically the great roads, to give you a sense of place and structure to the landscape. But I get it, given the rules, that the roads would not add any real value to gameplay. So they're there. I can understand the decision not to represent them, but I would have liked to have seen the Grand Trunk Road, the road up to Kabul, and the road down to Delhi, but that's a representation issue that as I say, I totally understand that. So it leaves you with a good-sized map. Again, it's not huge. It's 17 by 22, so it's a relatively small game map. Good-sized hexes. The counters will fit comfortably in there, and let's just toss a couple down on the map so you get that idea. This is the primary counters you're going to see on the map are going to be the field army markers. And when you get a combat, you'll just plunk a little combat marker on there. If like an army is activated, you'll hit it with an activation marker. Actually, it's done, so you remember that it already has moved within the turn. And those are the primary markers you're going to see on the tabletop. With an exception, there are garrison markers for both the British and the Sikhs. And they function as both depots and garrisons. So if you want to make sure you hold a city, you leave a garrison behind, and then it functions as an extension to your supply lines as well. So plain, easily modeled, very nice. I'm going to plunk a couple of counters out here just so you can see them and get a sense for what they are. These are Sikh infantry status markers. You'll never see them on the game map. These would be confined to the field army display charts and the battle chart, where they're used to represent the strength points within their respective field army. And you've got markers for infantry, you've got a marker for cavalry, there are markers for artillery as well, which we don't have handy. Okay, but they're good, they're nice counters. I really do like them. They I almost feel like they're made out of a very thick cardboard, almost bordering on wood. They are sturdy. They required a sharp blade. I used a razor knife, and they required a sharp blade to really get in there. just took my time with them and made, you know, multiple shallow cuts. Don't try and dig through there in one pass, but they will come out, and they'll come out looking very nice, very sharp counters there. I have no need to bust out my old Oregon lamination corner clippers and have at it with these. I'd actually, these counters are so thick, I'd almost wonder if my counter clipper would snap and choke on the task. So we're not going to do that. And there's no need. As I say, they're good looking counters. So that's a quick look at the map and the counters. So let's flip back and tune in for final thoughts here. Okay, so that's the counters and the maps, and you've seen the other components. I do want to give a shout out on Board Game Geek. One of the folks there went to a lot of trouble to put together some great player aid charts, and they are awesome. I highly recommend you download these for your game. One of the nice things I liked about this was the setup in the rules gives you the cities to place units. And that's great, assuming you're an astute student of the geography of the Punjab region. And while I knew a few of the major locations, a lot of the smaller ones kind of like going, I don't know. These charts give you the hex locations for all the troops, which makes setup a snap, really helped. And they help walk you through the combat tables too, which is very useful. All right, so let's talk about combat a little bit, just because I think it's one of the most unique facets of the game. And it does a fabulous job of introducing the fog of war into offensive operations. So you'll move your field army up adjacent to and then into the hex with an opponent. And only then are you actually going to figure out the actual strength of units involved in the battle. And that's done by rolling a couple of d6 on each side. I think the British actually roll 3d6 and keep the best two numbers, whereas the Sikhs pretty much use their 2d6. Commanders can provide some modifier to that. So if you got a good general, they can ensure that you bring more of your army into battle with you, and they're not left hanging out as a rear guard. It's an interesting mechanic. I think it reflects the British, I hate to use the word superiority, but advantage is probably a better word, in logistics and just general organization that comes with having the entire East India Company behind you. So they're generally going to be able to bring more of their army into battle at any given time. More reliably do so anyway than the Sikhs, who are at the whim of those 2d6 die rolls. I know 2d6 you're going to average about 7 strength points, give or take, but there are the distribution of results around that. It really is interesting because it makes offering battle a big risk. I mean, you just don't know. You don't have that level of control you have in a lot of other classic hex and counter games about bringing X number of combat factors into action and knowing that you're going to get like 3-to-1 odds and you can kind of predict where your result's going to be. Here, even if you show up with a raw numerical strength superiority of 3-to-1 odds, you're not really sure that you're going to be able to bring all those troops into battle and apply that combat power against the enemy. And that makes it a real unknown. It's great in that it does introduce this uncertainty into offering battle. But I think the other big thing it does is it really encourages the players to seek, not to make a pun there, but to try to better utilize maneuvering in order to achieve their goals. I think Liddell Hart's indirect approach is really applicable here. You're going to want to maneuver as best you can to put the enemy in the worst spot possible, and only then would you really want to offer battle to them. Now, that's all good, but we can get back to like winning the game. And the British have pretty clear-cut goals. They have to occupy a number of cities across the region, basically garrisoning all the towns that would ensure they have, quote unquote, put down the revolts and basically removed an independent Sikh state as a risk to the empire. The Sikhs, by comparison, they have to avoid the British victory conditions, but for a flat-out victory, they need to recapture Lahore, which was the historic capital of the Sikh Empire, but starts in British hands. And then they have to win several major field combats. And you may remember when I said that there's a lot of uncertainty about offering battle. It's going to be difficult to really bring them to battle with any confidence that you have to achieve a major battle just by bringing the troops into action. But once you've got them into action, you actually have to win as the Sikhs. So it is difficult. I think you can look at maybe taking a more passive approach and playing not so much for an outright Sikh victory, but maybe to avoid a British victory. So the game's got some tactical depth, or some strategic depth maybe, about strategies for how to actually win the war. Let's talk for a second about other things I really like. I like how it encourages the players to use historic combined arms tactics. You are rewarded if you can bring a battle that consists of infantry, cavalry, and artillery and bring that force into battle. So you'll get some nice bonuses. There's a lot of quote-unquote sieges. I mean, the game lengths are not short. I think they're like a month or so, if I'm glance at the turn chart here. Oh no, I stand corrected. They're about 10 days, it looks like, on average. Maybe. We got October, November. So we got about 10 days-ish. So it's, 10 days is still long enough that you can launch a reasonably small siege. I mean, it may not stand, it may not carry, but the game dictates that if you're going to siege a city or a fortress, you've got to have artillery in your army. So you are bound into bringing your siege train with you if you know you have to capture a city. I like that. That's pretty clever. So overall, really excited about this game. I've had an interest in the Anglo-Sikh Wars for, my gosh, probably 20 odd years now. And this is possibly the first board game I've encountered on the subject. So for me, that's a huge win right there. I'm really digging that. As a game, forgetting the theme and the setting, which excite me, I find the game intriguing. It's got a lot of different concepts. And that's a nice way of shaking up the old classic hex encounter game without making it so different that it becomes something other than a hex encounter game. So if you're looking for kind of a late black powder semi-colonial game, I would definitely encourage you, take a look at Into the Lion's Mouth. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks.